Hi, everybody. If you were not in our last meeting, I wanted to introduce myself to you. My name is Pamela Zarenka Moore. I am the director of the Counseling Services Office on campus. And I am here today with Jesse and Dan, full-time staff members as well. If you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan Jordan. I'm the Assistant Director of Counseling Services.
And I'm Jessie Kunwar. I am one of the counselors and the alcohol and other drug coordinator here on campus.
So also just really quickly before we start with our presentation, I just wanted to let all of you know that we are doing virtual sessions. We are operating as an office this year. So if you were not in the previous presentation, just want to let you know that. We are using Zoom for healthcare, and so it is a confidential platform. And we are doing programs, activities, psychoeducational events. We're doing them virtually this year. And so we're going to be using a lot of social media. We're going to be doing a lot of posting, information on the portal. So your student will get it via email. And yeah, so if your student is interested in seeing us, the best way to do that is to email us. So that email address is counseling@gmercyu.edu. And throughout the presentation, if you have chat questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we will get to them either during the presentation or we do have some time at the end for some Q&A.
So this is where we're going to start. These are all the topics we're going to cover today. And I'm really happy that we're doing this for parents. It's been a couple years since we've actually done this presentation. And early on, we had done this presentation every year. It's one of my favorites. And it's really directed towards you guys as parents, so you can help your student transition that much more. And under the circumstances of COVID, that transition is going to be very interesting, very unique, but also have its own unique challenges. And we wanted to make sure that you as parents had some support and had some information so you can help your student transition in the best way possible. So I'm really excited to do this. These are all the topics we're going to cover, and just kind of get started. So really, this is kind of a good one. I think it's also very ironic that we're talking about this during COVID, because really COVID just made this kind of a change. It made it really front and center. And so the only thing that's really kind of constant is things really change, and sometimes very rapidly. And so when things change, what happens? Stress kind of can go up, and stress usually kind of goes up in sort of the same level or at the same rate as the change that's happening. If it's a small change, you might kind of feel a little bit of stress. If it's a big change like we went through with COVID and being locked down, it's a lot. It's an awful lot. But stress in any form is also pretty normal. What's abnormal is thinking stress is not going to be the case for a lot. But stress is very, very normal. And the normal stresses that are going to come up are going to be those stresses for the transition. Uncertainty is also normal. So it was uncertain because we didn't really expect there to be a pandemic, but there is. So if you are uncertain about some things, it's really normal for young adults to be uncertain about a lot of stuff. How are they going to study? What grades are they going to get? What major are they going to have? They're not really sure exactly what career they even want. They may even change 3 times, maybe 4. But that's really normal. I mean, when we talk about uncertainty and adjusting to uncertainty, we talk about stress, we talk about if you're anticipating that and you think those things are normal to kind of have that uncertainty, it really helps with you being more resilient if you're kind of anticipating that there being some stress and it's normal and you kind of need to deal with it. And things are never going to be really kind of straightforward. There's always a level of uncertainty. You're going to have more resiliency, and it's going to help you manage that stress that much better. Now, the overview of the academic year. So for those of you who have never been in college before, this is your first child who's going to college, what typically usually happens is there's usually a honeymoon period. September is usually that month. Things are great. Things are happy. Meeting lots of people, doing that kind of thing. This year's a little bit different, but they may still kind of have that type of excitement to get started. And so that's really September. October is really where the rubber meets the road. And that's where if they didn't really transition very well in September, the academic kind of stresses come up. Midterms are happening, papers are due, sometimes often on the same day, 3 or 4 during the same week, and that's October. And that stress gets even bigger if they're not prepared for that. So if they get good habits ahead of time, that really helps with October, but still that normal stress is going to happen. And then again, we have Thanksgiving break, and that's a good thing. And then you kind of transition to finals, and finals week, the 2 weeks before finals, it's really a difficult kind of thing. Navy SEALs do not have a corner on the market of Hell Week. So this is really where the finals, there's a lot of stuff due, and it's really a difficult time. And then we have break. And then we repeat the whole process over again in the spring. But there's also the schedules are drastically different than what you're used to in high school. Drastically different. You may have 1 class on a Wednesday and then 3 on Monday and then nothing on a Tuesday. And it's really an awful lot of time. So when you have class, typically what there is 2 hours of homework per hour of class time. So there's an awful lot that kind of needs to be done during that downtime. And so they kind of need to manage their time that much better. But then the schedule changes in the spring. So they may have 1 class on Tuesday and then 3 on Wednesday. And other kinds of things kind of happen. So nothing really kind of stays the same, except that you're going to have classes and there's going to be a lot of work and you're going to have to do it. That really stays the same. But how you manage that and how you manage your time and how you manage the stress around all of that and how you help your student manage that, that stuff is really going to help out. So one of the things that does change drastically right overnight, as soon as they come to us, is that they're considered an adult. And they're definitely not in high school anymore, that's for sure. They are an adult. And so you may not know exactly what's going on in classes. And if you ask, you may get, oh, it's good. And that's that's about it. So because 1, they don't have to tell you. And 2, we're not obligated as an institution to tell you anything. Unless you sign a FERPA release. And that's kind of where parents go, where, what, where do I get that? And so, yes, you can have that. And that's available through the registrar's office or down at the Campbell Solutions Center. And so you get to know sort of grades and that kind of stuff if you want to be involved. And that's only if your child actually sort of signs that paper. They don't have to. And so with that, you're not going to know their grades. You're not going to talk to their teachers. You may kind of call them, and that's okay. You can call us if you have a concern about that. But we can't tell you anything about your child if we see them. We can't tell you anything about that. And that may be frustrating for some, but what is good is that you can use us as a resource to vent, and you can come to us and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do I do? And so we can kind of give you some tips on that. And so if you're concerned about your child, you can certainly tell us whatever it is that you want. And certainly we can sort of hear that. But if we're seeing your child, you're not going to know because we can't tell you. So that's really a big one. So if you want to talk to your son or daughter about those types of privacy issues and what information you're allowed to have and what information they're willing to share, it's a really good thing because it also treats them as an adult too, because they are. And so if you come to us, I know it's frustrating, but we can only do so much. So one of the things that does this goes along with things that are constantly changing. And so to know that that's really kind of the case, it's really to anticipate that things are going to change. They're not the same person they were as a freshman in high school. They're not going to be the same as a senior as they are now as a freshman in college. And so there's a lot of development that happens. And anticipating that and knowing that and really supporting that is really what we would like to see. And so it is definitely a new phase. They're developing their own identity separate from you as parents, separate from their family, and that's okay. And they can develop that in all kinds of different ways, however that is, but they are definitely moving through that. And there may be some stumbling blocks along the way. That may be okay for them. And so it's helping them move through that development as much as possible and in the best way possible. So even though they are your child, they're not a child. So how do you navigate that evolving relationship? Because they are asking for more responsibility, or they should have more responsibility, or they should be able to go ahead and have these adult conversations about how they're using their time, especially because they're home. So how does that how do you navigate all of that and their home? So all of that, it requires you to be communicative with them, but also treating them with some respect as an evolving adult, because that requires some adult kinds of conversations. So that's what you expect. So tips for success for them: involve them in sort of the campus community. We know that students, statistically and by research, that if students feel involved and connected with campus, they tend to do much better. And so encourage them to get involved in something on campus. Granted, it's going to be virtual, but that's okay. It may actually make that easier for some students to actually get involved in things, because it's a little easier to do that. Hey, you can actually go ahead and stop your camera from being visual. So that may help some students become more involved in something. It doesn't matter what it is, it just matters that they're connected, and that's an important thing. Also, being involved also means talking with your instructors if they need to. So encourage them to talk to staff, encourage them to talk to their instructors and reach out to them if they have questions. Certainly have those conversations about, hey, how's it going with class? How's this class? How are you doing with your homework? Those types of things are there. And you can always encourage them to go ahead and reach out for help as well. So that's also getting involved in campus too. So if they need a tutor, or they need time management, and they need an academic coach, those kinds of things can happen. Certainly if they need to be involved with us, certainly you can email us at counseling@gmercyu.edu. You can certainly do that. But also you want to have these conversations with them and follow up. So please reinforce what you expect of them as a student, as a young adult, in all different kinds of areas. What do you expect of them now that they are kind of home and they're going to be doing virtual stuff for the most part? They have to go to campus for FYE, but what are your expectations of what they're doing when they're in class? What are your expectations for them for grades? What are your expectations for them socially? If they have a relationship with a significant other, what's that like? And what are your expectations for them coming to campus and doing that? So across the board, what are your expectations for drugs and alcohol? Those kinds of conversations. What do you expect of them? If you expect them to share their calendar and let you know when there's kind of things going on and tests and that kind of stuff, if you expect that, go ahead and say so. It helps knowing what those expectations are from you, and you can negotiate what's kind of appropriate for them or not, and what they expect of you. So that's also a really good conversation to have. What are their expectations? What do they expect of you, and how can you help them? Do they even want your help? Hopefully the answer is yes. And hopefully, even though they may say no, it might be one of those kind of no's that's kind of like, no, I got it covered. But they really kind of do need your help. So kind of have those conversations coming, and just make sure that you kind of do. Don't be afraid to have that conversation. So everybody's a commuter. So traditionally, this slide was used because we had a lot of commuters. Not everybody stays here on campus. And so really everybody's a commuter this time. So it's really an important conversation to have. What do you expect of them with what are the rules of the house? That's kind of there. So they may feel as if, hey, I'm kind of in charge of things and this is kind of what I'm doing. So there may be some power struggles that can kind of ensue because of that. And so with commuters, there are some similar transition issues that there are for every other student as well. So those losses, there's a lot more losses this year. So the incoming freshman never had a prom. You didn't have graduation like that. You didn't have a graduation party. All those kinds of things didn't happen. We didn't have the traditional welcome to campus that I've been kind of proud of and really happy to do for the time that I've been here. We didn't have that today. I missed lunch. Lunch was great. You guys don't know what lunch was, but lunch was awesome. It really was, but I missed that today. I really did. I missed helping people move into the dorms and residence halls. So we missed that. So there's loss, and I felt that today. There's a lot of loss with these students too. They're not coming to campus. Other than FYE, they're not coming to campus for the rest of it. That's a loss. But it's also an opportunity to manage time better. It's also an opportunity for a lot of stuff if you take it and see it as an opportunity. So again, challenges around power struggles, have those conversations about what you expect and have those about what's an appropriate boundary, what's not, what's curfew, what's not curfew, those kinds of things, and how you're negotiating to have more freedom than before. What are their expectations of that, and what are yours, and what's an appropriate kind of thing? Do you want a parent without a net? I don't know. So it really depends on you and your child and your family and what you figure out for yourselves, but have that conversation. And how are you going to support them in making those connections, but also how are you supporting them in making the connections with academics and with resources that they may need? Sometimes it's really hard for some students to think that they have it and then know that they don't, and then it's hard to ask for help. Encourage help seeking is kind of the point. So we want you to be a part of the conversation, know that you are part of the conversation, know that you should be part of this whole thing, and know that you should kind of encourage them to ask for help when they need to, and ahead of time, if that's something. So if time management or academic coaching is something you think is a really important thing, reach out to them now. It's a really good thing to have, and it can help with that.
Okay, so we're going to transition a little bit into talking about some warning signs and talking about what to look for that kind of steps beyond the normal transition that we're talking about here. So, you know, some things that are normal is you know, having some nervousness about what this is going to look like, especially this year, being on Zoom and you know, perhaps some sort of worry about how am I going to meet people? How am I going to connect with my professors? You know, a lot of that is very, very normal. But I want to kind of focus our attention on things go beyond normal. So one of the big things for you guys to really look for is sort of a change in your students' behavior. So if your student is typically really outgoing or might respond in a certain way to a situation, and then a situation presents itself and that student is withdrawing, is not acting in the way that they typically would when a stressor is present, that's a big sort of red flag to have a conversation with your student about that. So, you know, I noticed that, you know, you have not been, you know, seeing your friends, or you have not been, you know, FaceTiming your friends as much as you used to. Like, you know, do you want to talk about it? Is something going on there? So using what you're noticing to start the conversation is usually very helpful, rather than saying, why aren't you doing this? You know, and instead it's helpful to them, you know, if you let them know what you see, and why that might be a concern for you. So some other things, other just sort of signs that things may be kind of stepping beyond normal transition. You know, if you're noticing anxiety that's just excessive in terms of, you know, worrying about everything, a lot of, you know, whether or not maybe they're having panic attacks, and this is a new behavior. Also, a lot of chronic sadness, and then issues with, you know, not issues with their sleep or their appetite, whether it's one way or the other. So sleeping a lot, constantly taking naps for hours at a time during the day, or not sleeping at all and staying up all night, and then, you know, doing that a few days out of the week, you know, that really has an impact too on mental health, and also is a sign that something may be going on with mental health as well. So Those things I talked about before, withdrawing from things, whether it's withdrawing from activities they used to really enjoy, or withdrawing from friends or family, not really engaging with them. These are all sort of warning signs. And again, they may not necessarily mean that there's a significant mental health problem, but it's just something to say, hey, let me have a conversation with you about this. And I think, if that's kind of one thing you take away from this is the importance of just communicating when you have a concern, and rather than saying, oh, it'll pass, or, maybe they're just having a bad day. I think just opening the lines of communication in general are just super important at this point. So we move on to the next slide here. I did want to put a particular focus on virtual warning signs. So Dan, if you could bring that one up. And I'll go through some of those with you. So I figured, with this year being what it is, at least this semester, I wanted to focus on some of the things that you may be able to look for that may point towards a mental health concern, that somebody's mental health is declining. So poor or declining hygiene, that's a big one. So if you are FaceTiming your student or something like that, if you're noticing that, that they're not doing their hair, or if there's somebody that would wear makeup, they're not doing that anymore, or they're wearing a hat, or they're just not getting dressed, in general, in clothes that they would usually wear. That's a sign that, something might be wrong. But again, something may not be wrong. Maybe they're just rolling out of bed, for a class, and they didn't feel like getting dressed because it's on Zoom. Like, I think we've all kind of, done stuff like that during this time of, not always doing the same routine that we typically would do if we go out. But, if this is happening on a consistent basis, and it's happening if they're coming home to visit you, or they're going out with, somebody, and they're just not taking that care, that's something to have a conversation about. So being less engaged in conversations, so this could be virtual, this could be in person as well. So, not paying attention, maybe forgetting, what you guys were just talking about, or just inability to concentrate, sort of looking all around, which is my next point there, is not looking at the camera or seeming distracted. So those kind of go together a bit. But also with the conversation piece is, if you've been trying to call them to check in, and they're not answering, and that's typically something like they would answer right away, or they would text you to say, hey, I'm busy. Being less engaged, less responsive, could be a warning sign there. So moving down a little bit, ending calls and video chats early, or the opposite of that would be dragging them on for extended periods of time. So either one of them, the first one may be, that person is trying to withdraw, from the situation, or from people and social contact. The second one, dragging them on for extended periods, maybe that's saying that, your student is lonely, they want to connect, with you, with somebody, and so they're really sort of, looking for that attention, so that's something to talk about too. So not responding or engaging in group chats, group texts, leaving on read, when you're text messaging each other, if that's happening and that's not typical of your student, then again, that could be a warning sign there. Declining FaceTime, so maybe not calling as much, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's phone, whether it's even text, could apply there as well. If you're used to hearing from them, and that's not occurring as much, then you want to have a conversation there. And then really pay attention to social media. I think it's important, maybe not to be over involved with your child's social media, but also to notice when, maybe they're starting to post things that are sad, or something that's different than they usually would, and usually has a tone to it that's negative. Okay. All right. And so just want to kind of go through quickly what helps and what doesn't. So what helps? Encouragement. Helping them plan for things is helpful too. Whether it's, coordinating times where you guys go out together and spend time together, even if your student is a commuter, they will be engaged in a lot of more work, in college. So, they may be in their room a lot doing work or out somewhere doing work, so planning things with them, being the holder of faith, giving advice when appropriate, providing a safe space, and listening. Listening, is really such a huge thing that a lot of people think, well, if I'm not giving a solution, then I'm not helping the problem. But a lot of the time, the problem is your student just wants to be heard and just wants to maybe to vent or to just talk about, something and just have you listen and be there for them during that time. So things that don't work, lecturing, hard and fast rules. I think it's important to be flexible. Unannounced visits, whether it's to campus, whether it's somewhere else, that can be unsettling for students. Helicoptering, restricting privacy, that too, sort of the over-involvement can be an issue and can also drive your student away from you. Being an ATM, that, probably won't turn out so well financially if you're, continuing to sort of fund everything that your student wants while they're in school. And then turning a blind eye. So, kind of like washing your hands of, okay, they're in college now, they can kind of do it on their own, but they still do need you as a support. So that's important to just remember that, they do want you there to a degree, and you just have to talk about what that is, what that looks like for your family and who's comfortable with what and coming to a compromise there. Yeah.
So I'm going to hop in there. To trust or not to trust. It's really important to give your students the trust that they've earned when it's appropriate, because when they do feel trusted, they have more self-confidence. They can stand up for what they believe in. So when they feel trusted by a parent, they feel more empowered and more able to stand up, not just to their parent, but to their peers when they are faced with uncomfortable or difficult situations or choices. When they feel trusted, that they know that they can go back to you as their safe space and they can come to you for support for whatever it might be. They're better able to say no. So peer pressure is something that still exists for the rest of your life. It doesn't end in high school. It's something that's always going to be around. And if they feel trusted by the people that they love and they care about, they're better able to say no and stand up for themselves when it's appropriate. When they don't feel trusted, that's when you get a little bit of pushback. That's when you start getting some defiance from otherwise very compliant young adults. They may not want to communicate with you about their college experience, whether good, bad, or ugly. If they don't feel trusted, they might not feel comfortable talking about it. They might turn to other people who might not be able to be as supportive, loving, and forgiving as you would be as their parent. Or it might just have a bad influence on them in general. They might be turning to the wrong people instead of turning to you as their parent or support person. And they could keep secrets. If they don't feel trusted, they're gonna keep secrets because they feel like they may be judged or you might get upset or angry with them. So they might keep secrets that could impact their mental health or other things in their life that could be harmful. Which leads into my role as alcohol and other drug coordinator here on campus. I want to talk a little bit about our program and what we do and what we don't do, as well as give you as parents a little bit of information on how to support your children and how to kind of notice when things might be off. So what we focus on here at GMercyU University is the more of an education standpoint. So we work through the RAISE program, which is reducing alcohol incidents through student education. So we focus primarily on making sure students know everything they need to know in order to make an adult informed decision. So we all know that while 21 is the age where people are allowed to legally drink, sometimes they are put in situations where they can choose to drink before then. My goal and our department's goal is to hopefully give them the education they need in order to make the healthiest decision for them. And if that is choosing to drink, that at least they know how to do that safely. As we talked about in the last slide, me walking in and telling young adults not to do something isn't going to work. They're not going to listen. So instead, I come in as a support person to them to provide them with the education they need in order to make safe and healthy decisions. So one thing that your students will be getting in their email within the next 24 to 48 hours is a link to complete some alcohol and other drug education. It's going to be through a program called Safe Colleges. It's a video-based program with some mandatory testing that's associated with it, as well as a survey that's going to help us as the university to provide the appropriate information for our students that are coming in and kind of shaping their college career and the culture around alcohol and other drugs. So that's going to be coming to them. They have about a month to complete it, and then they'll have a follow-up refresher survey halfway through the semester. So it's not like they're doing all this stuff up front, they're learning all this information about alcohol and other drugs, and then, you know, 2 months into the semester, they forget all about it, and they're just like, oh, I forgot all that stuff I learned a couple months ago because I was so overwhelmed with all the things. This is a time for us to reintroduce some of the most pertinent information that will help them make the healthiest decisions possible. So, as I said, my philosophy as the alcohol and other drug coordinator is to provide them with information. And something that we rely on heavily is social norming, which the universal belief is that you go to college and it's this rite of passage to drink heavily. And the reality is, and the statistics show, that it's just not the case. That's not actually what's happening. So what we focus on in our department is making sure that we break that stigma. We break that myth cycle that the media seems to perpetuate by giving students the accurate information that are reported by our students. We do a lot of surveying of our students, and it's pretty consistent, and it's pretty comparable to other universities, where we're able to see how much students are actually not drinking or are drinking, but are drinking responsibly. So we try to get that information out to students, and we use multiple platforms to do that. We historically have made posters all over campus, which we probably still will do in the res halls for those that are living there. But obviously, since they're not going to be in the normal educational facilities, we're not going to be doing that, but we're going to be relying heavily on our social media, because that's where the students are. That's where they're looking for information. And we're working really closely with other departments on campus that are able to share that information as well. So you can see some stats here for yourself as I was talking. I'm sure you've read them. So we're going to use our social media. We're going to use other departments. We're going to use the leaders on campus. So our Res Life, our orientation leaders, to make sure that they have that information so that they can also make sure that our students know that as well. Another piece that I just want everybody to know, because this is really important information for parents as well as support people as well as students, that there are two policies that the university and Pennsylvania have in order to protect the student. So what these policies do is they are encouraging help-seeking behavior. So medical amnesty and Good Samaritan policy. The medical amnesty policy is for students who are under 21, or people who are under 21 who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol and need medical attention. What the medical amnesty policy does is it protects them from the university of getting in trouble, and it protects them from the state of Pennsylvania from getting an underage violation if they need medical attention. So what they'll do is they say, like, I want to use medical amnesty. And we have cards in our office. So if there's ever a student or a parent that wants a copy of that, just let us know, and we'll make sure to get that either to you virtually or physical copy that they can keep in their wallet or in their purse. And they can use that so that they don't get in trouble for being underage and engaging in alcohol, and it won't keep them from getting the medical help that they need. The Good Samaritan policy is the same thing, but it protects their friends for helping them. So the Good Samaritan policy is for So if a student or a person is under 21 is also engaging in underage drinking and their friend needs medical attention, they can help their friend get medical attention and not get in trouble themselves. So those are things that are really important for parents to know, support people to know, and children to know. And for the Good Samaritan policy and the medical amnesty, if a student does use that and violates the alcohol and other drug policy here on campus, they will not get in trouble. They won't get like a sanction, but they will have to come and meet with me or one of our staff members for some educational sessions to make sure that they know the things that they need to know in order to make healthy, safe decisions. So something like that doesn't happen again. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so some things to look for, very similar to the things to look for when you're talking about mental health as well. They're very similar. Basically, what you're looking for is a drastic change in behavior or personality when it comes to drugs and alcohol. So you're going to be looking for students that are withdrawing from social interaction or withdrawing from people they love and they care about and isolating themselves. Because a lot of times when there is some heavy drug use or heavy alcohol use, there's some feelings of shame that goes along with that, and they isolate so that they don't feel that shame from the people that they love. Same thing with the hygiene. So if they are somebody who's usually very well put together, you might see a slow decline or a rapid decline in their ability to care for themselves and their hygiene, hair, body, makeup, whatever it might be, whatever they do to take care of themselves, you'll see a decline in that. Extreme fatigue. So that can look like really super long naps during the day. It could be them sleeping all day long. If it gets really bad and you see them nodding out, like if they're just in the middle of a conversation and falling asleep, those are some really big concerns that you might want to reach out and get some help. While I am an alcohol and other drug coordinator here on campus. Like I said, it's more of an educational piece. We do not provide alcohol and other drug counseling. So it's not like we do alcohol and other drug treatment here on campus, but what we do is we refer out as needed. So we work with a lot of the local drug and alcohol treatment facilities in the area, and we would help a student if they needed it to get that help. We've been very lucky that in my time here, that has never been something that we've had to do. Usually just some psychoeducation and support is usually what helps students thus far. Increased problematic emotions, depression and anxiety. So you're just noticing a huge shift in their emotional capacity to handle things might be lower, and they might be more extreme in their feelings. Decreased interaction with known friends. So you might start seeing some new faces that are coming around frequently, or not seeing the people that you know have been loving, supporting, and caring of your children or loved ones in the past. Like I said, drastic changes in friend groups. So people that have been around forever all of a sudden aren't, or those people, or there's just a whole bunch of new people around that. And you know what? A lot of times it just comes down to, you get that gut feeling like something's off here. And it's never, and as Pam mentioned in earlier slides, it's not like, what are you doing? Are you doing this? It's just noticing like, hey, I've noticed this. Is everything okay? Do you need any support? Do you need any help? And if it is something that you feel like is a big concern, that's when you kind of reach out for external help. And we're here as a resource as well. So another thing I really want everybody to kind of know the signs of are the signs of alcohol poisoning. So a big thing that I learned when I started this job that, and I really point out and try to push to the students when I educate them, is that vomiting is actually a sign of alcohol poisoning. It's not just something that happens when you've drank too much, or your alcohol is mixing with whatever you had right before you went out and your stomach is upset. Usually if vomiting is paired with drinking, it's usually because they have alcohol poisoning. So it's really important not to normalize that and not to underplay that. So if you notice that your student is coming home and they are confused, they're not making any sense, if they pass out and you can't wake them up, these are all serious signs. Now, I'm not saying that if your student is throwing up because they've been drinking, you should call 911 and think that something horrible is going to happen. But it is something to keep an eye on, and it's not something that should be brushed under the rug. More serious signs like seizures, slowed breathing, irregular breathing, hyperthermia, and blue skin. Obviously, those are all emergent things that would need medical attention almost immediately. If you do feel as though your student has had alcohol poisoning, you want to stay calm, because you freaking out is not going to help the situation. You want to get them to a safe place, and you want to lay them on their side to make sure that if they do vomit, that it can get out safely. You want to stay with them. It's never okay to let them sleep it off. That's not a thing. We don't want to be doing that. Seek medical attention. If you are ever in doubt, just do it. If you ever feel like your student is in danger or might have alcohol poisoning, just take them to get evaluated just to be sure. Worst case scenario, they're going to get an IV with some fluids to help rehydrate them if they're just a little drunk. So keep them awake. Don't let them pass out. Things that you don't want to do, like I said, don't put them to sleep it off. You don't want to give them food when you think that they might have alcohol poisoning, because when you have alcohol poisoning, all the systems in your body kind of slow down, and you're not able to do the things that you're able to do. So giving them something to eat actually could cause more harm. So you don't want to do that. Same thing with medicine, because they might not be able to swallow the medicine. Giving water would be okay in small, tiny sips if you feel that it's appropriate and they're awake and alert. You want to give them some water, that would be okay. Obviously, you don't want to let them drive, and you don't want to leave them alone. I could say it a billion times. Don't leave them alone. You want to keep an eye on them.
Okay, thank you. So we're coming to the end of the presentation here. So I really wanted to make this point before we start to get to questions that you have. It's really, really, really important to realize that not only is this a transition for your student, but it's a transition for you and for your family and for, that student's siblings, if they have any. So, self-care is a huge thing. Take care of yourself, during this time, because, things are not going to be the same, and it's going to be a totally new thing to get used to. And again, this may change too when classes are back on campus and back in person. Then there may be another change after this change. So just, recognize if you feel like you need more support. So, reach out to other, parents that you may know that may have their children in college for the first time. Even if it's not the first time, it's still a transition, no matter what child is in college. So just, if you're noticing these warning signs in yourself, or if somebody else is noticing them in you because of this change, just reach out for support to somebody that you trust and somebody that you can talk to, and have that conversation. And take time for you, because this is a totally new phase, for the family. So take care of yourself and make sure that you get what you need, because, if you're feeling well, then again, how that affects the family, so if everybody is feeling supported and everybody is feeling, like they can get through this transition, then, it'll be better for the family unit in general. So just be aware of that. You need care too, and you deserve it. We'll move on to the next slide here. I realize that we have all phone extensions here, which is great, but if you'd like an email address to somebody here that maybe you didn't get in the other session, feel free to let us know, and we can get that information to you guys. Let me see here. So we'll leave that up. You want to leave that up maybe just for a second, and then we'll transition to Q&A. And actually, while this slide is up, I wanted to mention something that I think is really important for everybody to know. So I got a private question through the chat box, and I wanted to let you guys know that we educate faculty and staff members about this stuff as well. So about what to look for, what are the signs that a student is not feeling well and maybe declining. So they will be recognizing these things, as well as staff on campus. People will be recognizing these things and either reporting to us, or we do have what's called a care team on campus. And if a professor notices something that they're concerned about, typically they'll address it with the student. If they feel like, that issue is continuing, we have a way for that professor to enter a care report. And basically what that is they write a brief description of what they feel is going on, what seems to be going wrong. And then there is a core group of people that will handle that report. And it's confidential. We don't talk about anybody that's reported to the care team outside of that room. And we come up with a plan of how we're going to handle that. So whether it's myself reaching out because it's a mental health concern, or whether it's some other area on campus that might make sense to reach out to that student, we will connect with them based on that care report. So that's just important for you guys to know. There's actually a lot of the people that are on this resource list are part of that care team. So that's another way that we try to, catch the things that are going on, with your students, even if they're not reaching out for help themselves. All right, so why don't we move to Q&A? And if you'd like, if you have any questions that were not answered. Doesn't sound like that's a question. So if you guys have questions, you can definitely type them through the chat box. We're happy to stay on for the next few minutes if you guys have anything that you'd like to know about us.
Also, while we're waiting for any questions, I would just like to take a second to introduce myself. I realized I was just in 2 sessions with you all, and I never introduced myself to you all. I met all of your students earlier today. I'm the assistant director for new student orientation. So majority of the day I'm with the students, and for the next few days I'll be overseeing some of their programs. But I forgot that I initially didn't introduce myself to you all. But I had introduced myself several other times before this morning. So if you all need any information about any of the materials that you've been given today, or have any questions about the orientation program as a whole, you can feel free to contact me at davis.d@gmercyu.edu, or the easier one is orientation@gmercyu.edu. I do respond rather quickly, but since the orientation program is happening, it does take me a little bit longer today to respond than on a normal day like yesterday. But thank you. I'll turn it back over to counseling.
Thanks, Danielle.
Cool.
So
we have a question about where does somebody go if they're going to do work study, and how does the program work? I can't tell you how it works. I can tell you they're considered an employee, but I can't tell you anything else beyond that. I think you have to go to financial aid and ask them. I think there's a whole thing about work study. You may want to check your email because if you qualified for work study, financial aid may have given you information about work study. So that may be something that you need to check on, but definitely financial aid, because it's part of your financial aid package, and you can just email the financial aid department about that, and they'll be more than happy to give you some more information.
Yes. Yeah, that's handled through the Campbell Solution Center, so which also houses the financial aid. So you can email them directly, and they can talk with you about that. I know that there are going to be work study positions this semester, even being virtual. So I know some offices cannot, like we will not be able to have a work study student this particular semester just because logistically it won't work with our setup, but there are definitely opportunities this semester.
Okay, well, it looks like we're starting to wrap up. I'll give it a few more minutes, but I also just want to say thank you so much for taking your time today to be here to talk to all of the family members. I really appreciate it, and I know I learn something every time I hear you all speak. So
That's not the comments.
I really appreciate you all being here today. So we'll hold out for a little more questions, but if you don't have any further questions, I'm going to say you can go ahead and sign out at this point. Thank you so much for coming.
Hello.
Hi. Do you have a question?
I'm sorry. I was trying to find the